Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the David Whitten Bell Gallery at List Art Center at Brown University. My name is Ian Alden Russell. I'm the curator here at the Bell Gallery, and on behalf of all of us here at the Bell Gallery and indeed the Brown community, welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. A lot of critical ink has been spilt in debating about whether or not art can change the world. Tonight, I don't know if we can make that proposition, but I certainly think that the works that we'll enjoy at the reception help shift, reframe, at least contribute, and hopefully catalyze things in this world. And I would say that many of us probably at moments like this hopefully find that open spaces such as this gallery and this university have become all the more significant. Conversations such as the ones that we'll have, and I hope all of us will have at the opening tonight, and are all the more important. And if I may say, the work that artists such as Fatma Bucak make, the work that they do, is all the more urgent. So tonight, we're going to have an informal, relaxed conversation with Fatma Bucak. She's a photographer, a performance artist, an installation artist, and we will be celebrating with her the opening of her new exhibition, And Men Turned Their Faces From There. A few words of thanks. We are deeply indebted to the Fondazione Sardi per l'Arte in Turin for their generous support of some new works that Fatma has brought to us at the in the gallery here today. We're also indebted to the Saha Association in Istanbul, again, for their support in the production of new work by Fatma. And we also would like to thank the Brown Arts Initiative for their generous support, not only of us, but of all of our arts colleagues across the university. Personally, I want to say a deep word of thanks to my director, Joanne Conklin, for believing in me, giving me an opportunity to work with you and the fine team that you've brought together, and supporting me in working with artists such as Fatma on these brave and sometimes unknown journeys where we support the making of new work. And so I just want to say thank you for your bravery and your support. I also want to say a huge thanks to our preparatory team, our technicians. Art doesn't happen on its own. It happens because artists work, because institutions work together, and our technicians really pulled in the long hours. Ian Budish, Nashan Hale, and Kara Blaine. I think it's really important how teams like this work, how universities like this work, and how we can work together to support the creation of new work and bring work from diverse perspectives, both within our own communities, but also throughout our world. So introducing you to Fatma Bucak. Fatma was born in Iskenderun on the Turkish-Syrian border. She studied philosophy in Istanbul University and history of art and etching in Italy at the Albertina Academy of Fine Arts, before completing an MA in photography at the Royal College of Art in London. Her works in performance, photography, sound, and video center on political identity, religious mythology, and landscape as a space of historical renegotiation. Bucak has had solo exhibitions at Castello di Rivoli Museum of Contemporary Art in Turin, the Pori Art Museum in Finland, Arter in Istanbul, Art Pace in San Antonio, Texas, and the Writer Project in London. Her work has also been exhibited at the 54th Venice Biennale, the Jewish Museum in New York, the International Festival of Nonfiction Film at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, SALT Istanbul, the Institute of Contemporary Art in London, Contemporary Art Platform Gallery Space in Kuwait, and La Permanente Museum in Milan. In 2013, she was the winner of the 13th Ely Present Future Prize and was selected for the Bloomberg New Contemporaries in the same year. She was an artist in residence at Townhouse in Cairo in 2014 and went on to win the Academy Now London Award. She was also a recipient of the Arter Koch Foundation Contemporary Art Grant and UniCredit Project Grant in 2011. Welcome, Fatma. Glad to have you here with us today. To sort of start us off, and I know some of you had an opportunity to take in some of the works in the gallery, there might, at first instance, encountering your work, be something of an unexpected feeling. The themes that you address are important, urgent, difficult. However, the works are sometimes far away from those, in a literal sense. And in looking at some of the gestures that you've offered in your exhibition here today, it seems that there's this displacement occurring. You're not literally showing issues of media censorship, nor are you depicting literally state violence. Those are central to some of the concerns you've been exploring. But the work seemed somewhat removed from that. And I was wondering if you might open up our conversation with what you believe the space between, if you will, the event, the issue that you're responding to or processing or thinking, and then the work that you subsequently make and show.
First of all, thank you to all of us for coming. Thank you, Jan, for being with us and making this show possible. My works, yes, it's true that we are talking about the urgency, we are talking about what's going on today in the world, we are talking about directly, that's the thing that is about today. But we never ever have the sense of a complete information anyway. Then through my work, I'm touching also the issue or maybe the process of having this information to different gestures from censorship, the state violence that is shaping the information that we are having. Then we never ever actually reach what's going on to a direct connotations. This is probably how I end up having different gestures that brings us to have a distance from what's happening, but in the same time having a sense of what's going on. And these are the things maybe we can just open up with different works. For example, I would like to start with 84 images that they are in the show. For example, in that work, I have been for 84 days, I have been washing up the newspaper that I collected in Turkey. Starting from 7th of February, that it's basically a pretty difficult moments of Turkey that started from 2015 on, that it's happening in eastern Turkey with the Kurdish conflict, but has not been touched because today much media is already controlled by the government in itself, and either the newspaper, they are intimidated, or journalists, they are intimidated, or they are pro-government that we hear just part of it, or we never hear it. Then what I was thinking is, whatever we are seeing, it seems to be there, and it seems to be the same every day. But in the same time, because the news that they have been touched, they are practically shaped by the geography, by the politics of the states, by the propagandas that has been chosen by the governments. And I decided that it's the best to see them through the liquid, through the information that it is the density of the newspapers that can talk about the censorships in different layers. And starting from 7th February, where there has been a huge massacre in eastern Turkey that hasn't been told, with the Kurdish, some of the Kurdish that they have been burned, and we still don't have the complete information about it. And I wanted to start from that day and follow the news for 84 days. And what I was doing with all the newspapers that I could collect every day, between 20 to 30, I wash them and have this gray, dirty water that I have been keeping, and basically keeping on my hand and taking photos of it. Then there has been a process of it. There is an information and there is no information that I have been washing. And in the same time, I have been taking photographies of these liquids that I am showing through my 84 photographies. And this process, they are, yes, becoming far from the information, as it is the informations that they are shaped by the government, that they are not letting us to know what's going on. Then this is why probably this kind of process, they are helping me to shape also the idea of how never we have the complete scenario or complete story of what's going on today. And this is how probably I end up doing using different process for each work, and where I am treating the work as it is a material sometimes photography, sometimes performance, but becoming practically something else. But if you go and see it, actually you're seeing what I would like to talk about. And that is kind of curtains, like curtains that more you open it, more you will have the information about it.
Absolutely. The thing that I might say, or I'm often moved to say when thinking about your work, is that it's not immediately representational, though it does undeniably move one to feel that something is represented, or perhaps something is present. Issues like this are present. And that sort of issue of perhaps directly, like avoiding direct representation, and I might say like reveling in how one could indirectly represent, misrepresent, shift, perhaps. It really pushes things into the space of aesthetics. And at this point, I just thought what we're going to do is sort of have an immersion of work by Fatma over the years that'll just sort of play behind us. And at points, we might depart to it. But this early work from your career sort of shows how careful you are with setting, with place, with frame, color, tone. I know how exacting you are with printing images at this stage. Beauty is, I would say, central to at least my experience of the works that you have here. But these days, often beauty is distrusted, at least within the realms of like political art or socially engaged art, meaning that the aestheticization of a difficult social or political issue is something that is questioned, understandably and appropriately. But you're not shy about beauty. And I was wondering if you might say a little more about how you sort of approach aesthetics, and then particularly, with the exhibition that we have here, which is rather beautiful and handsome, how you feel about that in relationship to these difficult issues that you're touching on.
Sure. Okay, I grew up with a family where they were politically engaged in the country from the 70s on. And we grew up in that landscape, so in many landscapes that I have been working also, not all the time, but many times, the landscapes that you will be seeing that will be somewhere where I passed, or either we lived, etc. And it is true that talking about the politics, it's in the first place, superficially, it seems that aesthetics should be taken out of it. But I grew up in these places. I passed through many political issues. My family, they grew up there. And the only thing I saw, I grew up with the news and dirty images, dirty talks, and dirty, incomplete, let's say, landscapes that they haven't been shown many times, that they are already showing the traces of what's going on there. And since these landscapes, they already have their own identities, I never ever been scared of talking about them as they are, or creating them as I have been seeing. And I do think that being scared of aesthetic as it is, I'm using, or many artists they have been using, it is, as it is denying an identity that it exists. And talking about politics, it doesn't require to ugliness. It's already ugly. The stories are ugly. Then putting that ugly into, or talking about that ugly that's happening in a beauty, it doesn't mean that you're actually not talking about the ugly situation. And this is why I haven't been scared, actually. I know these places. I grew up in that situation. Then I think I'm well aware of what I see and what I'm talking about. This is why probably I chose this path, and differently or similarly to some.
So at the same time, those who may not know you yet, or know your work, or know these places, they encounter your images, and again, I can speak to my own experience. I have a breath. There's a moment of breath of appreciation, right, of these stunning landscapes these bodies, these settings. And I guess, perhaps what is your intention or what is your hope for those who may not be familiar with these places but have a form of aesthetic or emotional response to the images that you're making?
It is also because the first step to any work that we have, it's really important that as you are just being close to something, some image, some work, then if they are welcoming you with something, then you are there to open the other curtains, other questions. Then if you're scared or if you are intimidated by anything, then you will be much scared of looking at them as they are. Then this is probably why it is also important to create a kind of relationship where you are not intimidated by what's going on, but you are willing, actually you are welcomed to look at what's going on exactly behind what you are seeing or in front of you what's happening. Yeah, that basically helps also to create a premise relationship with the work that is helping and it's welcoming somehow to even to ugly situations that we are going to maybe witness in a sense.
So sort of shifting from aesthetics, but diving a little more into sort of practice and process. Many of the works that you have really particular materials, and you're very careful with how you work with those materials, how you respond to them, how you present them. And I sort of wonder if you could sort of expand on not just the representation of these situations, these places, the images that you make, but the materials that are within these images, in this case, these sunflowers and other works that we'll find in the gallery. These other very specific and significant materials, not just in regards to you or your practice, but to these broader issues that you're touching on.
Then we can talk about the flowers first, that they are coming from Damas. Yeah, it is the material of some of the works in the exhibition, they are really important, where they come from, what they represent, they are processed by different things, and which I would like to suggest we talk about first the cultivation that we have in the exhibition. It's called Damas Roses. And these are the flowers that they are coming from Damascus, Syria. And it's called Damas Roses because they grow in Damascus, in Syria. And as you may know, immigration has been one of the biggest problem of our era today. And we are talking about just in 2016 of 4,700 people missing or dead just in Mediterranean. Then these are the huge situations, and all of us, we are intimidated to work about it because it is ugly, difficult to talk, and sad, but in the same time it's urgent that it needs to be opened, somehow it needs to be talked about. And when I was thinking about all this and doing my research about the immigration, Syrian war, etc., I saw an article about Damas Roses in one of the Turkish English written newspaper that they were talking about how the environment, soil, it changed because of the war. And because of the people fleeing out because of the war, and there was nobody could take care of these flowers that they were delicate and they needed so much care. And they were talking about nearly 70% of the production being dead. And they are expecting, of course, if the war, which seems to be continuing, if the war continues in 2 years, we will not have any Damas roses coming from Damascus. And it's not that Damas roses here, they are important and special. They are roses as any roses. They have been even taken from Damascus from the 13th century in Europe. And now you can even find more in Bulgaria than in Syria because of the war. And I was just thinking, is there any possibility for me to take some of those Damas Roses today to see what happens if they travel for days to come to Europe and to be cultivated here? And the cultivation requires a matching with another flower from the country where they are going to be cultivated, to see what it comes up and to see if there is any possibility for them to grow. As it is, trying to trace this in the minimal way that I could do, this journey of the immigrants, and this if this journey could give any hope to any of these flowers in a sense. Then I have been in contact with many people. Of course, it is a difficult situation. Nobody trusts to nobody, especially Kurdish person coming from Turkey was a big enemy then. That was one of the biggest problems that I had. For months, I tried to find someone. At the end, from a friends of friends of friends, that I managed to find someone from Damas who was willing to help me. And we managed to get first box, I think, of the flowers, and second has been destroyed because they were coming from an unknown sender, and they had a really amazing journey. They were coming from a really unknown landscape because you didn't know where they were coming from. At the end, they entered to Beirut, then they go to Saudi, and they arrive who knows where, I don't remember, and they travel basically 2 weeks to come. In that moment, we sent it in Italy, I think, and to arrive to Italy, then to Turkey. And this journey was emotional for me, nothing to compare to anybody who's waiting, some relatives, but it was really important to see if we will manage. The first step was if we will manage to have these flowers coming from Damascus. It was a symbolic gesture. It's not, I'm not going to save the world by having 50 flowers, but it was really important to see if there is any other language through which we could just talk about that without intimidating, romanticizing, or either not letting people to have possibility to open up in a platform. And the cultivation was really interesting also because you had to have a piece of these flowers to put it into another flower into country, and then hoping that these two, they will match. And the flower coming from the Syria, should love the home and the land, the soil. And in that case, could grow. We don't know yet. We just cultivate it and we will see what will happen. And that is one of the material we have it in the exhibition. And this journey that flowers they had to take. And 2 boxes, 2 flowers, we are talking about 100 flowers that they have been lost in journey. And 50 of them they managed to come. And an unknown sender, a unknown people that I had to talk to, because you have to find a fixer in order to get the flowers, etc., etc. All this was a complicated situation for a flower to come. And we all know a little bit about what's going on with the migrants today. And knowing that I'm talking about just between 150 flowers, the 50 of them, they managed to come, and we are talking about between who knows how many people, 4,700 people being dead. I just wanted to try if there is any material that lets us open up to this issue in a different way, maybe hopeful way, maybe, I don't know. And that was one of the material that I wanted to have it in this exhibition. And another one called a black ink, you will see in the exhibition on the floor, a A4 page, where I'm describing how I did a black ink with which I wrote that paragraph, explaining what is my recipe to do that black ink. That black ink is made by ash I collected from burned books that they are burned in June 10th in eastern Turkey, because there was a huge attack to one of the biggest important Kurdish publishing house in eastern Turkey, in Diyarbakir. And half of the books, they have been burned, and the other half, since people, they wanted to save it, and they just took the water, of course, and half of it, they were just wet, and you couldn't use it. And I decided that in order to bring to issue on our tables, instead of bringing the burned books, I could just use them, process them, to create an ink that explains where they come from, how they have been, why they have been burned. It's a question that we will ask when we see the work. But how I managed to do it, I managed to do this ink through the book that have been burned, because it was related to an identity that has been attacked in Turkey in many years, that I couldn't say just last 3 years, last 4 years. And these are the materials that, they are the process, as we were talking about from your first question, but also they are materials that they bring us to look at differently to what we are seeing. And as it is, you would like to talk about magenta, and you're just showing two colors that they are actually creating the magenta that you would like to have. And I think these materials, they are important sometimes to touch, sometimes to see, sometimes to just your gesture, just, you know, this, for example, black ink work is on the floor, that you go down there to just learn what happened and how we arrived to that information actually. And material and how we approach the material in that sense, to me it is important, and I think to many people will be quite elaborative way to go through the events that I'm talking about.
One of the things that strikes me about your process, we say maybe process of displacement in dealing with these materials, and I can speak to this firsthand from having worked closely with you, is how caring you are for the things with which you work. And you, at various points in our time together, have spoken with great conviction about ethics, the ethics of how you are committing yourself both to the gesture but to the material and what the material signifies. And I sort of want to open up a space to think a little more with you about how you approach, or how I guess, how do you understand, interpret, construct, share your ethics, both in terms of your materials, but also subtly to shift us into thinking about people, because that's another theme in your work, is how your work has emerged from work with the people who are living in the places where you choose to perform or film.
Yeah, we talked about it when we had a breakfast. It was reading, because I started to work and I just didn't realize that wherever I would go to do my photographies, because I treat every photography, every image that I'm doing as performance. And all these performances, they were coming from a place where I would work for hours. And whenever I was working in different places, I would just meet a lot of people. Then you will see the image, you know, any image that we are seeing just behind us, or any video, then you will have many people in front of the camera that they are watching also what's going on, and they would have a lot of course, comments. They wouldn't like, or they would like, and they wanted to know more. They wanted to be part of it. And when I started in 2008-09 to do many images that they were part of some different landscapes where I was meeting with different people, I just realized something that we already know, how art is a small niche. Then people, they don't know, and they're not attached to the art, but in the same time they are curious. And explaining to them it's difficult, takes time, etc., etc., but it is also another type of public. They're not scared to talk, they're not intimidated at all. Then they will intimidate me quite often. Then I started to have this experience that it was there, but I was not seeing. In 2010, I went to work in one of the abandoned villages in eastern Turkey, where I did this work called after a coup d'etat, when my father and his comrades were communist teacher. And I met with few people from the village, abandoned village, from other villages that they were coming because they saw us coming, 3 of us working in the place. And they had a lot of questions, they had a lot of curiosities, and they threatened, and they wanted to be part of it, but they didn't really know how and why. And I started to think it is pretty curious to understand what it will be the relationship of the public in the work as I'm having it in that moment. Then I would like to talk about one of the works in the exhibition called Blessed Are You Who Come, Conversation on the Turkish-Armenian Border. I went there. It's a village where the Armenian people, it was their home, and they had been kicked out, and Turkish people, they had the place, of course, and the traces of the landscape was amazing, because this landscape, this huge Armenian area with amazing churches, they have been disused, and this church, they turned to be, some of them mosques. Then after that, they didn't use it anymore. Then it became museum. Some of them, they were abandoned. It was amazing to see all these traces of the history of Turkey. And I wanted to work with the villagers that they used to live in the village to remind them some gestures that it is related to Armenian culture and religion, and what they know about Christianity, what they would have as a relationship, me as a young woman working with 13 old men that I invited, what it will be our hierarchical position, how they will just interpret being in front of a church. This video is in front of an Armenian church. And I invited them, I stayed with them for a while, then, waiting for the right moment and working with the natural lights and etc. And we have been there for long enough to understand with whom we wanted to work, who are the group that I wanted to work with, and how I had no idea, of course, how they would interpret my gesture, how they would interpret the being in the performance. And of course, it's a work. They are the people that I invite them, they're paid. And they come because they are invited and they are part of the work. Then from that moment, I started to investigate somehow if there will be a public that is not in front of the work, outside of, in an exhibition space, etc., but inside of the work, commenting the work, if there is any possibility for work to open up more. Then this is how I end up working with different people. Of course, I collaborated with many people, many organizations. In many of my works, I had to work with different feminist groups or either human rights organizations, and you meet them, you work with them, but it's different to work with the local people where you would like to investigate some question with that local people. And an ethic is just how you would like to approach to people, how you explain them what you're doing, and how you can have a relationship that is not between two friends, but it's a work relationship, enough to have a space to not disturb each other, but good relationship to understand what we are doing and how we are collaborating. That means being clean, clear, and giving a space, time to them to trust you, because it takes time. You cannot just simply go to someone and say, hey, do you want to work with me? And nobody will come, or nobody will just actually give everything they have in that moment. Then, this is how I end up actually working with the people, deciding how I would like to work with them, how I would explain an artwork to a group of people that they don't have any relationship with an artwork. Then having a right language, having a right amount of money, having a right amount of time to having all this means that you solved your ethical questions that they're not letting you slip in order to work. But in the same time, letting work to have possibility to brief also. For me, that was the moment where I decided actually to have different groups to work with also in the work.
many of your works have occurred in numerous locations and situations, and in these days, we know a lot about, or we think we know a lot about things that are happening in many corners of the world, but it can sometimes be hard for us to approach them, particularly if I think about us in Providence, Rhode Island, and what does the Turkish-Syrian border mean to any of us individually. And I think it can be difficult to find one's place and approach situations like that. And I have been moved in your work with your ability to connect with people, to go to places, to approach them, your bravery in approaching them, and then making work about that place and with them. And if I may prompt you to sort of speak a little bit about the images that we have now and are about to come, I had a great pleasure of being able to bring you to Art Pace in San Antonio, Texas, for your first project in the United States. And it was an exciting moment, but also I invited you with some trepidation because I knew I would be inviting you to a situation that may not have been as immediately familiar to you. And I humbly learned about what ethics, presence, and commitment really is through the way that you worked with the communities in southern Texas on the Mexico-US border. And so I was wondering if you might just share a little bit about your experience working in southern Texas, and perhaps particularly about the communities that you were spending time with.
I have to admit I was practically shocked about the situation that I read before going there, but I was not expecting too much of what I saw. That people, and walking around the border and then seeing many clothes that they are representing how many people they are passing through and how these issues they have not been treated as much as they have to. In a country where I have to say between all the problems that this country might have as many, and the possibility of freedom of speech is much more than what I could experience in Europe, in Turkey, in Middle East countries that I have been, or North Africa, etc. And I was moved and I was shocked by how big was the problem of the immigration in the country and how much visible it was. Like basically you could just stand in a place where you could see tons of people coming, walking, and yeah, you read about it, but you don't read that much about it. And this is how I end up thinking it was really important for me. I was not even planning to make a work or working because I was totally intimidated by the situation. And I work with some border situations and I work in some landscapes where I could just be sometimes in danger, sometimes intimidated, sometimes it's too big to treat, and sometimes you withdraw yourself just to work as as an activist or sometimes just as helper, etc. I'm totally shocked that when I'm talking, I'm practically just being confused about the different layers of what I saw and what I was hearing about it. And because we are talking about a big country with a huge power, and before these elections anyway, things they didn't seem to be so complicated. But what I saw was everything was pretty complicated, difficult, and immigration situation was awful. Visible that I couldn't believe that could be invisible in where I was working in Texas. And this is why I decided to work with a different, I decided to learn a little more than what I read and what was going on in the area. And I contacted a human rights organization in San Antonio. They have been really, really nice. And I traveled for nearly 2 weeks with a group of nuns, 3 people, 3 women, and with whom I learned quite a lot. we traveled on the border, we saw different group of people that they were trying to cross the border or trying to find the missing people, or had a possibility to see how they are trying to match DNA of the missing peoples that they have been collecting on the borders, or tissues of the skins that you could find it on the surface of a soil, that you could simply be walking on it. And how people, they could be not knowing so much about what's going on in front of their door. That happens quite a lot on the border area of Texas. And I have been in Laredo, of course, quite a lot, to travel with these 3 people to understand what was going on, to see the situation, and to know more about the numbers, and meeting some of the rangers, you call it, the people that they have, to see what they think, how they treat these people when they see it, because as I said, it's visible, meaning that I'm walking and I can see 5 people crossing the border, or they just already crossed the border and they're trying to understand how to avoid border patrol. And it was all that was too much to elaborate for me, that I couldn't do if I was not somehow in relation with some organizations, that to understand what I read was true, but in the same time there was much more than what I have been reading. And in that sense, as I was saying, first in San Antonio, then in Laredo, I had possibility to meet different organizations, had possibility to visit them, visit other border situations, and some organizations that they were already helping to many immigrants, and many of them, of course, non-government, and some religious organizations that they are doing great work with the private money. And after that, I managed to have a possibility through the art pays to meet a Mexican young woman who introduced me to different people too. Through the organizations, through this woman, I managed to have different group of people that they were either the people that they just crossed the border, or they were in this limbo of waiting for the documents, or either the people of 2nd generation, 3rd generation of the families that they crossed the border, and they were born there, they were raised in America, but still having some issues with racism. Then I managed to work with this group after that I have been connected to different people with the organizations and singular people that I met in Laredo, actually. That's your question. Yeah. Not sure.
Sort of shifting towards the end of our conversation to open to questions, one thing that I've been very moved by in working with you is, although you bravely are confronting these difficult issues and reflecting on them with great commitment and care, I don't think I've had a conversation, no matter how difficult, whether it's about budgets or about production or about the pragmatics of these political issues, where there hasn't been a smile or a laugh. And that's something I think is really special. And that's not something that I think is unique to our experience, in that I think it's something that's present in a lot of your work. Though the issues that you confront are difficult, there's an element of wit, of humor, of joy that's still present despite that. Black ink, there's a humorous tone, a suggested place for you to see it. The women in the Tuzgolu, the Salt Lake, you see that when you enter the exhibits. There's humor, there's cleverness on their behalf in how they are negotiating and approaching your work, approaching you as perhaps an unknown. Likewise with the men on the Turkish-Armenian border. And I guess I just sort of would love to sort of wrap up with a sense of what is it that, despite the work and the issues that you're confronting and committing yourself to and continue to confront, what is it that helps you continue to smile? And how does that persist in the experience of the visitors that see your work?
I'm not that smiley, I have to admit that. But some of the works they are. And why that's happening? Because, okay, we have to admit the situations when they are so hard, it's really easy to be intimidated to talk, and it's right that we have a right distance, not being ironic about some subjects. For example, when I was working with the Mexican migrants, I could not be. I had to have a right distance in order to work with. But when it happens to be my family, in a sense, my land, my geography, my culture, even if there is a huge conflict, a war, the life should go on somehow. Then when you have that kind of situation, my family, they passed through a difficult moment. My father has been in prison. But even in that moment, there was all the time a possibility to smile, because you have to somehow. If not, you will be suiciding, or either you cannot live. That is where sometimes, not all the time, I have possibility to open up in an ironic way also to the work, towards the work, and letting the work to smile sometimes. As I said, that doesn't mean or doesn't require in every work. Whenever I feel confident, meaning that I can enter because I know the situation, I'm part of it. Unfortunately, this is pretty human. It's nothing to do with art or being an artist. Then we are less intimidated and we can just elaborate with whatever we have. Not easily, but with different angles. Then you can find different angles there. But when you're just far away, that you're not sure if you know the complete story, that happens all the time, because none of us, we might know what's going on truly, then you cannot have that kind of language. And that language comes from, I think, because it exists. It's not something that I discovered, or it's not something that I'm putting it with. It's there. But it's me that I can honestly be pretty comfortable to see it, to approach to that, and make it possible that to exist in my work when I know it. Yeah. In that sense, in some works you will see also humor, although it's talking about maybe feminism, being a woman is a problem, but how and where, actually, in which land that happens. Or either we are talking about this 13 women that they think and they accept me as a part of their group. This is how I feel, I'm part of it. Then I can actually be ironic about it too.
Well, at that, I think we'll take some time for some questions before we go celebrate and open Fatma's show officially. Are there any questions or urgent thoughts or comments from the audience?
This is the difficult moment for everybody, I know.
Absolutely.
Hi, thanks for being here, Fatma. I know the situation has been really rough on journalists in Turkey. How have things changed for you as an artist with a political angle?
That is really interesting because, as you may know, we are talking about 100 journalists being arrested today, up to today, and nearly all newspapers being intimidated or supported or shaped by the, how do you call it, government loyalists. And it's a hard situation. Before that, my experience in my country, in many countries as an artist, has been pretty relaxing. In North Africa, Middle East, I'm talking about this lands, in Europe. But today I'm talking about the last year probably, last 2 years. They are touching to the art too. They started to have being scared. Then whoever is traveling in the lens that they think we don't have to have information from, or either just talking about it through Twitter, Facebook, or whatever we have on the internet, then even the artists have been started to have an attacked and intimidated and scared. I have to say, last time when I went to Eastern Turkey, I never ever thought that I could be that scared. And I went there was nobody except a journalist coming from France and me. And we have been followed by two men that I have no idea, and I didn't know the guy, he didn't know me. But the people that they were following us, they already knew who I was, what I was doing. They already knew where he was coming from. And they asked him something when he was alone, and they asked me something when I was alone about each other's. And then I started to feel like that is becoming practically hard for all of us to work. I have to say it's interesting for me to see how the Turkish government having any trouble with the art. That is something really interesting for me, because they never ever touched art as a problematic. And if there is a nudity, maybe you would have a problem in some exhibition, etc. But being political in your art was not a big thing. I'm not sure if it was not a big thing, if it was less important up to today. But they started to understand there is a value of spreading the word through art. This is where they started to get afraid of what we do. Then, as you may have followed, there has been some artists being arrested for a few days, for a few weeks. And this is all is happening because they would like to scare every groups, from journalists to the artists, everybody. And that is, of course, I cannot say that I go to Turkey and when I go to Eastern Turkey, I'm just totally free and I'm just going out and drinking my Coca-Cola or whatever, and then I do my work. That's not happening. When I was working there, I had to be in a hotel for all the time that I was not meeting with someone, and wouldn't have so much time to spend with many people outside, and wouldn't even have so much possibility to walk around the city and without me being followed. The last time, that's what I experienced. And today, if I have to return back, probably I will be thinking 3 times before booking my flight, probably to there. In that sense, yeah, it's getting really difficult for everybody. Less for us, more for journalists, of course. But depends on how much you will be spreading your word. That's the thing. Then I don't know what will happen today, but I know things are getting pretty problematic for everybody. Not just for artists, even for, my auntie who is just a woman working working and living in Eastern Turkey in a small village. It's a problem for her too now. Yeah.
Thank you. That is really beautiful, and it's also really nice to hear and give the context. I was wondering, there's a feeling of a mythological scale in the compositions of your work, the way the landscape is covered, and even this image that you're talking about, holding the jar, where so much, in a way, the historical specificity, or even a way in which an image gets grounded in a place. A lot of those details are shown to make the individuals in the story appear in a timeless and in this kind of, I want to say, antique landscape. And so I just wondered if the mythological scaling in the work was something that you were working with, and what, yeah, I'm just letting
Thank you for touching that. I have been really careful about, whenever I do work, about the timelessness. In a sense, the lens, the issues we are touching, they are not of today. As I said it in the beginning, they are timeless. They have been in the past, they will be in the future. As much as human beings they will be living, they will be there. And landscapes in itself, this is why there is a specific timing where I do my performances, for example. There's no shadow, technically. That helps quite a lot to understand that there is no movement of the light. And mythological in a sense that more religious approach, maybe it comes from the mythological sense of it. This is where I will be talking about probably some of the works that they have this religious sense and this religious connotation. Sometimes they come to the mythological images, how they have been described in the stories, for example, how we can actually imagine. And this is why the landscapes that I choose specifically, they will be treating the work that's happening around and in as part of these stories. For example, when I was touching, for example, the Salt Lake work, timeless, and there is a place but non-place. You don't understand where you are, what is happening. Actually, it is practically displacing you through the time by being timeless, but in the same time through the time, in a sense, you don't understand where you are, how you can be with that people, with that imaginary, but in the same time, as it is an antique image, as you were saying, but I will call much more from the past, if it is not sometimes from the future. And that gives a possibility to landscape to exist within this story, or either to let what is going on to exist by itself as a story, as it is happening in the Salt Lake. And some of the works, they have quite a lot religious connotation. This is where the landscapes, they become practically how you call mythological. And yeah, that's it actually.
Time for one more if anyone's eager. And if not, I think it's all high time that we have a glass of wine
Good.
and celebrate
Thank you.
Fatma's opening. Thank you for coming.